All right. So anyway, this morning I felt nostalgic. I was down having breakfast, and there was somebody there wearing an MEDC 2006 World Tour T-shirt, and it brought me back. I don't know how many of you have been on this journey with us back to the old Windows CE, Pocket PC, Windows Mobile days or not. Good. The last time I was here in New Zealand, actually, was doing the MEDC World Tour. We were here, we were down in Christchurch, and I also remember back then we had 47% global market share for smartphones. I guess a few things have changed. Anyway, good times. Sony, let's get after it. We're coming back. So I'm Rob Tiffany. Spent most of my time at Microsoft kind of working with that group, you know, the Pocket PC, the Windows Mobile guys, Windows Phone. I currently work in a incubation group in Microsoft, you know, and it's just kind of like what you might think on the outside world with startup incubators, you know, where you bring new products in, hold their hand, as far as acquisitions we make. And so still in mobility, working with our Internet of Things stuff. I know there are more than one Internet of Things that we have. Specifically, I work with our Azure Internet System Services stuff, agent sending data, telemetry data back to Azure. I also work with our device management stuff, Intune, Configuration Manager, our new Enterprise Mobility Suite. So that's where I spend my time. But I'm still a developer and passionate about line of business apps. And I'm really excited about this session here. It's a really long title. You could tell I was probably trying to get like search engine optimization or something on the web by putting as many keywords as possible in there. That's what I'm all about. I don't know, did anybody go to Build in San Francisco or watch any videos or something? One of the cool things about Build, if you're familiar with this, we have this product called Azure Mobile Services we've been working on for a little while. And something really remarkable, or at least it is to me, was announced at Build. And what it is beyond all the stuff that Azure Mobile Service, you know, Azure Mobile Services is basically there to try to make lots of hard stuff easy for you. You know, web APIs, auth, you know, push notifications to any device, lots of stuff like that. But here's the really remarkable thing is we came up with this new sync technology. And we first announced it at Build. And it was going to, and since Azure Mobile Services is about working with any mobile client, any device, they had to bet on a database that works everywhere. And so they bet on SQLite because it's already built on the iPhone, Android. We run it on all our platforms. It's everywhere. So sync is a big deal for me because I've been involved in some of the world's largest data sync projects ever over the last more than a decade. And I still get calls like every week from every corner of the world, from the biggest companies you can imagine. So many companies you couldn't believe over the last more than a decade built line of business stuff running on Windows Mobile, kind of rugged devices, barcode scanning, RFID, things like that. And guess what? They all use SQL CE database. They all use merge replication with SQL Server. And you know why they did it? Because it was easy. It was expedient. It got to market fast. They didn't have to write a lot of plumbing. They didn't have to, you know, I love to write web services and web APIs as much as the next guy. But managers and CIOs, they're not as into writing software as us developers are because they see risk go up. So they love it when they see a black box like replication that just takes any data in this database and puts it on a device. Wow, that's easy, and we can filter it. So guess what? Here we are again, and now we've got something that's a lot like that runs in Azure, runs on SQLite, runs on any device. I'm going to do it, obviously, from more of a Microsoft perspective and just stick with universal apps with our phone and tablet and take you from that perspective. So we only have 60 minutes, so let's just get after it here. So I guess I want to start off with why you should care. Because that's always a big deal. Why SQLite and sync? Part of this is just because enterprise apps. You know, everybody's been going crazy. You know, no doubt about it. The iPhone has driven this surge in consumer apps since the 3GS came out, and Android's gotten even bigger, and it's just nuts. But guess what? Guess where you make money? You make money with enterprises. Those companies are the ones that have the dollars, not the 99-cent stuff. And so when you start needing to build enterprise mobile apps, and I've built a zillion of them, and I built the big systems too. In fact, you'll find when you're building enterprise mobile apps, you may find yourself spending way more of your time on the back end, actually, than you do on the client. But the data needs are a lot more intensive. You've got to be able to reliably connect to those back-end systems. You can't just hope it's all going to work out. You need something where it's built in to be reliable on horrible networks, something like miserable like GPRS, where the networks are dropping out, things are coming and going, stuff like that. Your authentication, your auth requirements are a lot more stringent than consumer apps when you're building for the enterprise. And so great thing there is Azure Mobile Services will let you, authenticate with AD, Azure AD, and you can do directory sync with your Azure on-premise. I know people love to talk about all the consumer side of that. Hey, I just authenticated with Facebook. But you probably aren't going to do that for enterprise apps. You're going to authenticate with the AD that they're using, your customer. And this just is kind of an obvious thing. You've got to be able to keep working whether the network's there or not. Lots of people think offline data is some magical thing. How can we figure that out? It's so hard. And it just and people talk to me like that all the time. I'm just like, really? You've got to follow a different pattern. You can't follow this web pattern where you're fetching things on the fly as you need them to do your job, to paint screens. You've got to prefetch in advance, have what you need offline so that you can go out and do your day. And when you have connectivity, synchronize. Get new stuff, upload stuff you captured, things like that. Real simple. But make the app always looking down at the device rather than always looking up at the cloud. Make sure it can operate always looking down at the database. So we picked SQLite. I kind of alluded to the fact that it's running on the iPhone and Android. Really simple. Just does a single file database, and it runs in process with whatever your app is. Nothing magic. It's public domain. I mean, you can do whatever you want with this database. Really, anything you want. It's not like some of the other open source licenses where you've got to send back your stuff or whatever. And again, it's fast. It's got ACID support. Everybody knows what ACID support is. We're all DBAs in here, right? Okay. Key takeaway is you're going to have that durability. If you're in the middle of a transaction, think about ATM machines. I'm pulling money out of here and putting it there. Just think about that on your device, and your device dies, runs out of battery life in the middle of a transaction. The key thing is you get that ACID support, that automatic rollback, and all that stuff. It's just perfect for mobile devices. Unreliable data networks, unreliable devices. You got a perfect database for that. So that's kind of why we bet on it. And so Azure Mobile Services has just built this neat offline data sync and just wrapped around SQLite so that and you don't have to do the plumbing. This is the great part, and I'm going to show you that. And then here's the other cool thing. It's built-in change tracking on SQLite. Because normally this is stuff you have to do yourself in code. All those inserts, updates, and deletes that the user is doing, your employee out in the field, capturing data, getting new data, doing stuff like that, all that. Usually you have to do that yourself. Well, this, it's just built in. You don't even have to think about it. It's just brain dead easy. And then conflict resolution. Back to the DBA hat, there's a term called optimistic concurrency, which means I pulled some data and I'm not connected to the database anymore, and things could have changed back there in the cloud or wherever on that database while I've been gone. And so someone else may have updated a row that I wanted to update, and you could have a conflict, right? Well, that's a problem, but that's the way things are in the mobile world, so you got to have capabilities to deal with that. So we build in conflict resolution. We have row versioning built into the tables that go up to the cloud in Azure as well as in SQLite, and they can tell if those changes have been made, and then they can interactively allow you to choose who wins. Does the server win? Does the client win? Or you can programmatically decide that. And then, like I said before, authenticate with Azure Active Directory. That's the gold standard. And then cross-platform push notifications. All the other stuff you get with Azure Mobile Services. The easy push notifications to whatever the device is. You don't have to be an expert in all these other things. I think that's the key takeaway with Azure Mobile Services. It's a mobile backend as a service. That's the space it plays in, an MBAS. It's kind of the successor to the mobile enterprise application platforms that have been out for the last 5 to 10 years, except these are all gone to the cloud. We're going to make hard things easy and make it about getting all mobile devices taken care of. So let's get after it here. So I'm going to spend some time first just kind of going through the nuts and bolts of SQLite. I'm going to do a bunch of demos, but I'm not going to do everything in demo land. So there's a lot of stuff I'm just putting on the screen slides so that when you take the deck with you, a lot of the information that normally I'd just be going to the web and doing lots of things, you'll just see it here. So you got to go ahead and get your SQLite database, and you can go out to SQLite.org, and there's binaries. The great thing is we've got Microsoft people sitting on the board working with SQLite to make sure that we've got lots of great stuff for our platform. Because previously, no doubt about it, they were hanging out in Linux land and Unix and OS X and everywhere but us. So we've got binaries for that. So you're going to go down. So I'm talking, universal app here. So Windows Phone 8.1, Windows 8.1. So you're going to separately need to download these pre-compiled binaries for each of them. And you're going to save them locally. It's going to try to save them as a zip file. Just rename it to this VSIX extension that Visual Studio understands. Then you're going to just do a quick install. Just double-click on both of them, and that's going to install SQLite that works with both the phone and big Windows. Then let's get started. Let's create the basic empty shell of a universal app. That's easy enough in Visual Studio so that you'll have it there. And then we got to set references. So like I said, it's both. There's different databases for each one. So you're going to set a reference, for the big Windows runtime 8.1, and then you're also going to set a separate reference, because remember, in the universal app, you have your two projects inside your solution. So do right-click and do references for both, so they all have each one has the correct version of SQLite. One little gotcha here is that by default, .NET loves to do this any CPU thing, like it's just magic or something. Well, but when you're working with native code, like SQLite, which is written in C, you don't get to just automatically do that because it's not a higher level language like .NET or Java or something like that, right? So you need to go in the build menu in the configuration manager, and you need to specify exactly the CPU architecture that files are going to, that SQLite's going to. As you can imagine, on the phone, it's going to be ARM all the time. And then it could be different things, and you can have different versions in the Windows Store for your big Windows Store apps. When you're debugging, though, just set everything to x86, because you're just going to be doing it on the desktop. So the next thing you need to do is let's get mobile services in the game. We've got SQLite figured out, so we need to get the SDK. So we're going to go to our good friend NuGet. And again, in both projects, you're going to go to NuGet. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab Azure Mobile Services. When you're searching for it, I need you to, at least today, because we've been going through alpha code. In fact, I think my deck is probably out of date. I know we're in beta now for some of this stuff. So you're going to have to make sure you choose pre-release, because I think right now we're at 1.3.0 beta is the pre-release we're on. So you're going to do that for the SDK for Azure Mobile Services, because part of this is you may or may not have known Azure Mobile Services previously was just a Node.js based system, JavaScript on the server side. More recently, though, we've added .NET support. And the .NET support on the server side is what's making all the sync stuff possible, actually, and a lot of great new things. And it's a more comfortable environment for folks who do .NET development. So the next thing I want you to do is the SQLite store. Go through the same little process. It's in beta now. The SQLite store is basically the magic that wraps around SQLite, does the change tracking, does the sync stuff for you, conflict resolution, so that you don't have to do that. It's a PCL. You all know what PCLs are, hopefully, especially when you're doing universal apps or if you're using Xamarin or things like that. You'll absolutely use this. And this technology actually, it works with Xamarin as well. I think it works with Objective-C now. I don't think we've rolled out the Java version yet if you want to do just straight Java to Android. But we're in pretty good shape. So in Azure Mobile Services, you go to the Azure portal. You're going to create a new mobile service. You have your URL. You're going to pick a database, or maybe you already got one, what region you're in. And you're going to specifically choose, I want to do the .NET backend instead of Node. And then specifically on the database, we've had some updates with SQL database. And so, again, it's going to build that URL for you, new and existing, just some, basic home, housekeeping here. But then now you've got some new features in this advanced database settings, because we did just have web and business prior. I think there's a session this week, actually, or maybe it's already happened, that talks about some of the new features of SQL database in Azure. But now you have some new SKUs to choose from to get more guaranteed IOPS. better performance, larger sizes, things like that. One thing to note here is while I'm just talking about just SQL database, we are very flexible. It will also work with MongoDB. It'll work with Azure Table Storage. And then the other cool thing is, it's not in here, as you may have heard about the kind of a BizTalk online that lets you do some hybrid connections. Because I never hear the end of it. I hear lots of customers, and I tell them about this, and they're like, great, that's what I want. What's the on-premise version of that? Because I'm not doing that cloud thing. And I'm like, so I'm not going to say we have the whole thing done, but we have simple code examples where the Azure Mobile Services, the sync technology, it goes up through the cloud, but then it goes right back down on-prem to your on-premise SQL server and can do all the change tracking and all that stuff directly. So I know it's not 100% on-prem. It's partial. And so I would encourage you to take a look at some of these new BizTalk services we've added in Azure, because it makes it really simple to build these connections that just go right into a customer's data center so that you can keep using, because people have existing systems they want to use. Everything's not a greenfield project, as we all know. All right. So up in Azure land, you're gonna choose a mobile platform. You can see a few choices: Windows Store, Phone 8, iOS. I just want you to just choose Windows Store for now. And I don't want you to have it to create a starter app for you. I want you to just choose connect an existing app, because it's going to create a zip file with a bunch of bits in there for you. And you're going to download this locally, and you're going to include it in your existing project. So the little shell of a project I had you create a few slides ago, you're going to copy the folder that's inside the zip file right in there and add it in so it's part of the solution. And that's going to get you going. That's kind of get you kick-started into doing the sync stuff. And then last but not least, you need to build it all, make sure it doesn't blow up, and do a little test. You can right-click on the system, and actually I'll do that here in a second, and you can see that it's up and running. The cool thing is you can test this locally. You've got your whole Azure emulator on your desktop. It's using SQL Server and some other fun stuff in the background. So you can do 100% of this stuff locally. You don't always have to. And then I'll show you in a second. And then when you're ready to go, you can just switch this little line of code, and then you're hitting your live system in Azure. So let me give you a quick look at that. Let's go back to number 1. No videos this time. So let's kind of look over here. So you can see here I've got your typical universal app, solution, Windows 8.1 up here, Phone 8.1 down here, and then we have a shared folder, which is the key thing here is I'm going to share a lot of my assets. I'm going to pull all that stuff out of these specific things so I can reuse them. And this will also be what's going to help you if you go to Xamarin or some other platforms. And then the other project you're going to see is the part that I had you download and included. So I created one, Contoso, that famous company. It creates a service for you, and so you can test right away. You can right-click on it, and I'll hit debug and just say start a new instance, and it'll fire up, and hopefully it's all going to work. But anyway, the cool thing is this whole thing is based on the Web API. It's REST, it's JSON. So we didn't come up with a proprietary wire protocol or any weird magic stuff, and which is a good thing. And so literally the great thing, just like the Web API, I'll be doing a session on this tomorrow where I'm talking all about Web APIs, hitting SQL 2014 in-memory tables, is you can test them all with your browser long before you built your client app. That's the beauty of it, is you can do all your testing and know it's going to work before you've even built a client. And so here, it builds API documentation for you. I've got customer tables, order tables. Probably nothing's going to come back here because I don't think I have anything in the database. I shouldn't. It's empty. But anyway, you kind of get the gist of it, is you can do all your testing here and have a good sense that things are going to be working just fine before you build your clients. So, database, I have such a DBA focus on this because the heart of this system is really SQLite. So you have DDL and DML mostly when you think about when you're talking with databases traditionally. And so let's just kind of walk through that, and that's kind of the lens we're going to go through when we parse this all and talk about both sides of the system actually. So obviously you're going to create the database. that little wrapper that I had you download, there's this mobile service SQLite store wrapper. That's the thing that you're going to use, and it makes it super simple to create the database and the tables. You're not going to be writing tons of code to figure that out. Table schemas. So entity, is anybody familiar with entity framework? Like code first kind of stuff like that? That's the underpinnings, especially on the server side, is it's using entity framework. So unlike systems where normally I would use use an entity relationship model and model my database first, I'm going to do this with code. So I'm going to model my database with objects first. Now, it doesn't mean you can't. We have this other tool called AutoMapper that you can use to talk to existing stuff, because I don't want you to think this is a green field only scenario. So the table schemas are just public classes that you're going to create that model what you look like, you know. And so on the client side of your universal app, you know, in that shared area of the universal app, I'm going to have you create a data objects folder. The only reason I'm doing that is because it does the exact same thing on the server side. And for every table you want, you're going to just create a little POCO, just public class, you know. Public classes, first name, last name, phone number, blah, blah, blah. The special thing, though, that comes with the sync technology and the change tracking and all that is that each one's going to have this, the key. You might want to call it customer ID, but in this case, it really wants you to call it ID. And you're also going to have a version property. And the version, I'll show you how that works a little bit later, because later I'll do a demo where I'm going to force some collisions. I want to try to create errors so you can see how it works. And so the versioning is going to be using that. The server side also has a data objects folder. And in this case, though, all the objects are going to inherit from entity data. And it's going to, but not use the ID or version, and it's going to look a lot like stuff you may have done before if you've used the entity framework. So here's an example. Like I said, I'm going to show you the code, but I wanted to give you a few slides so you could actually just be able to quickly reference this in the future if you need to. This is what a typical table is going to look like. It's just a class. So your customer class, notice we're using Newtonsoft JSON. Does everybody know that stuff? It's just so much faster. I'm so glad we're using it. Anyway, so my customer ID is just my public ID, my getters and setters. Because of using the Newtonsoft JSON technology, we do have to decorate, like I have first name and last name, we decorate that as property names, as you can see here with those two JSON properties. And at the very bottom, you just have a decoration for version, public string version. So the key thing is whatever you're building, just it needs to have a primary key. Every sync technology I've worked with over the last 400 years, whether it's RDA or merge or sync framework, they're all based on one thing. Boy, we really need that primary key because we got to track all this somehow. We have to tie it together. So version and ID is what it's going to be in common. So that same table on the server side is going to be a lot simpler. The key difference is in inheritance. It inherits from entity data. And then you don't have to worry about the ID stuff or the version. You just have the first name and last name. So you'll have those, you'll marry those kind of up together. And then I'll walk through the code here, but you know, when you think of DDL, I'm creating the database and I'm creating tables. So I'm going to declare a bunch of tables at top, and I'll show you that in a second, but you can kind of see here, this is the example of how you do that iMobile service sync table. And then I've got my folder, data, objects, and customer. That's my class. That's a customer table. And as many tables as you have, you'll have different lines of those. And then the create database thing is the simplest thing ever. I mean, really, it's like one line of code. var store equals new mobile service SQLite store, and then you name it, and it just works. And it'll just work on your phone. It'll just work on your tablet, whatever. You don't have to do anything special. And then you add these tables in that you pre-created, because you're going to kind of pull them in so that it says, hey, I'm working within the sync context. I know that not only have you created these SQLite tables, but I need to do change tracking on these tables, and I need to sync them and things like that. You'll also see down here, I have the sync context, initialize async, this deal at the very end, the sync handler. I have a generic version of a sync handler. It's just a class that handles conflicts resolution when you have two people kind of trying to update the same thing at the same time. That's what's, and we'll walk through that. So let's take a look at some of this stuff, just so you can get a quick view of it. So let's go back here. Well, actually, for starters, up here in the shared area of my client, just like I showed you there, you see I've got customer table. It looks just like the slide you saw. There's orders. So I'm going to download customers. I'm going to create orders. Here's something a little strange. I have something called an order view. A view. How database? Anyway, this view doesn't get synced and doesn't go anywhere, but I still created it because I'm going to need it when I do a multi-table join in Link, which is really weird and strange, but it's important. And so to be able to have that work, and then here's an example of a product table. And again, I'm keeping this really simple on purpose. Other things, so the unified, app.xaml that everybody gets to use. And so right here at the top, you can see where I've declared these 3 tables right here. So I've created a customer, a product, and an order table based on those customer, product, and order classes you just saw. This right here, this next code where I say initialize mobile service client, it's really that simple. And this is all boilerplate stuff that comes when you download that from Azure Mobile Services. So this is the local version of that where I instantiate that client and just do it against localhost. And then when you're ready to go live, you'll comment that and uncomment the bottom code, and you'll point to your site up in Azure, and you'll pass along the key. And then again, just like I showed you on that slide, here's an example of the create database. If the sync context has not been initialized yet, then do all this stuff. Create the database, add each table, and then initialize. Instantiate all them so that you get going. And so that's pretty simple. That's kind of the DDL. If you think of DDL otherwise, you're writing all your statements. And you can do this with SQLite too. Create table, your ID column, what data type it is, not null, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, which is fine. So this is just the kind of that link to SQL looking way of doing it is probably the big takeaway there. And that's why it's different. Because we need more than one way to do the same stuff, right? Okay. All right, so DML, working with the data. This is the hardest stuff. You're only going to build it once. Hopefully you won't change it too often. But this is where you're going to spend time. I'm really cynical about enterprise apps. I think that 90% of enterprise apps are all exactly the same. But it also hopefully helps you to chill out. Because lots of people get overwhelmed and they think of this big mountaintop and they've got to climb to when they're building an enterprise app, how hard it is. But you know what? They all really do the same thing, don't they? They pull data down from some back-end database or some data store. They show it to you. You add some data. You send it back. I mean, isn't it really what it is? So that's the great thing. Take a load off. And so know that the sync stuff's going to pull that stuff down for you, have it locally. You can show it with the UI that you're going to build. And you can capture data, and it's going to change track and send stuff back. And so that's all it is. You're going to load and display. You're going to enter data. You might have some workflows, little wizards you go through to transform data to do something. I'm going to do a purchase, like I'm doing a shopping cart on a device or something like that. I need to perform calculations. I need to capture new data about my environment as telemetry to pass back to Azure. That kind of sounds like Internet of Things, because while we're at it, let's just throw this in with it too. The Internet of Things doesn't always have to be a little sensor that's having with an agent on it to stream data over a really obscure wire protocol to have it be part of the Internet of Things. I think it's a continuum. It could be a reader board sign or a sensor determining the temperature or moisture on a farm. But it could also be something a little bit bigger like this. And the data is just a little bigger to begin with. And that data still goes probably up to the same place in the end. And you're doing work and you're doing transactions, but you're also maybe analyzing metadata and other environmental factors as well. And so sometimes you may find that if you're using a larger kind of device as your endpoint, your sensor, whatever you want to call it, and you have bigger data needs, you might find that working with something like this with SQLite makes absolute sense. And then how do you do it? Like I said, you're going to use link skills when working with this wrapper because it's kind of based on language integrated query to do all the CRUD stuff. And ultimately, that's what I have to prove to you in this session is I have to walk through and show you that I can do all CRUD operations that you would normally do on a regular database so that you go, okay, this is legit. He's not full of it. And again, you're not going to use ANSI SQL. You're going to just use link to SQL type stuff. So here's some quick examples. And I'm just purposely, they're brain dead simple ones. So select. And I apologize in advance. Andy's going to kill me over there. I'm not doing MVVM in this. So I'm just going to show you straight up how you do things. So I'll have a UI element and connect it to a query. So a list view, basically the item source, and I'm just doing something as simple as just, so we had that customer table you saw me create. Remember, it's in that app.xaml, which is kind of like a singleton static looking thing that everybody can access. So app.customer table, and then this is just a simple select. You can go as crazy as you want. We have tons of documentation on link. If I wanted to insert a new row in my table, then I can do it all in one shot. There's two ways of doing this. This way is kind of the more succinct way, where I'm taking that customer table and inserting it, but also newing up that customer object right in the same call to slam it all in one shot. And so that's how you would do an insert into the table. An update, in this case, I'm going to do a query at the top here, and basically I'm looking for someone whose last name is Randolph. And when I find it, this for each statement is how you're going to iterate through these tables to perform that operation. It looks a little weird. It took me a long time to get this right. I had to spend some time with engineers to get the whole await query to enumerable async blah, blah, blah thing to work right. But this is how you do it. So now you know, because I went through the pain, so you don't have to. And then I just set the first name equal to something else, and then I update it. So that's what an update looks like. And guess what? Deletes look a lot like updates, don't they? So in this case, here's one where I'm looking for someone whose last name is Tiffany, and then I'm going to delete that person. So that's kind of your basis of CRUD. But, seeing is believing, right? So I'm going to go through, and we're going to do it on both platforms, because universal is believing, right? We got to make it real. So here we go. Luckily, I have my favorite mobile device in the world. It's called a Moleskine and a pen. No offense to the Surface Pro 3. I'll get there. It's a journey. Anyway, all these complicated scripts to go through. All right, so let's fire up. Let me go back over to the right so you can kind of see here, because you've got to set startup projects. So in this case, luckily I've already got Windows Phone set as a startup project. And so I'm just going to fire this up, and let's just get after it here. Notice I'm using the 8.1 update. Here's another thing I just want to say as an aside. I'm using the 512 meg version, kind of the low-end emulator. I really would urge all of you, if you can, to build your enterprise, your solutions, with the most low-end emulators we can give you so that you don't exclude people. There's another, you know how there's this mega trend? I spend most of my other time in my life doing mobile strategy, and there's no code at all. It's kind of interesting, but not as. But so, the big mega trends like BYOD, right? Everybody's going to that. Did you know there's a tiny little trend going the opposite direction, though, that's barely reported on? It's going back to corporate libel. I'm not saying it's a big movement. It's small. But I talked to enough CIOs around the world, and guess what? Some of them thought, some of them are not as enamored with the BYOD experience as others. Some of them have embraced it and said, this is great. Other ones, highly regulated situations, stuff like that. Lots of folks who are exiting, getting off of BlackBerries, but they still want to do that. This is really hopeful to me, because it's been great talking to CIOs who say, boy, I want that Windows Phone 8.1. You guys have finally got a device that's as secure as a BlackBerry, and your operating system runs great on low-end hardware. And it's really cheap. And I'm just going to buy one for all our employees. I'm like, yes, do it. And so that's exactly what's happening. Like some serious companies that you would know of that are actually doing that. Because the price is right, the security is right, the OS is right, and everything. So it's all good. So I'll get off my soapbox there, and let's get back to some coding here. All right, so we got our little 512 meg Windows Phone. I know it sounds ridiculous. We used to build apps for the Pocket PC with like 32 meg of RAM. So I'm going to just go through some CRUD operations here on the phone, and then I'll do some different operations on the tablet. So I'm just going to hard code an insert here first. So let's expand this stuff so you can see it. And I apologize. I find that learning through debugging is a beautiful thing. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to make heavy use of F10 and F11. All right. But luckily, I got tooltips turned on really big. So here's that insert. Here's the thing where you saw Andy Wigley before. We're just shooting him in. So I'm going to put in Andy, and then I'm going to put in myself, and then Nick Randolph. I think he's over in Sydney. And then Martin, who's over in Amsterdam. We're going to put that in there. Then I'm going to add to the product table locally. And this is all going against SQLite without any weird stuff. I'm going to insert the motherboard, some RAM, a hard drive, and a graphics card. And nothing blew up. So now I'm going to do a select. So nothing magically got data bound to here because unfortunately I'm not doing MVVM. But I just wanted to illustrate kind of, in raw code how that would happen. So those are list boxes, one for customers and one for products. You see, I'm basically just saying, give me everything. So we'll step through that. And sure enough, here's everybody. There's me and Andy and Nick and Martin. And then we got some products here. So insert. Check, select, check. So the next part of our CRUD journey is deletes and updates. But I'm not going to just, wimp out on you by just doing the most simple versions of that. I want to show you the wide range of how you can do deletes and updates so that you see this is a comprehensive tool that you can absolutely use for all your most serious enterprise apps. So let's just do delete one. So kind of like you saw on one of the slides before, delete where it's my last name. It's going to go through there, delete async, and let me just cruise through here. And of course, I'm hitting select again because I'm not data binding. That's going to get annoying, isn't it? But anyway, sure enough, though, now it's just Andy, Nick, and Martin are left. So now I want to delete many. So in this case, I want to delete everybody who's not Andy Wigley, or at least whose last name is not Wigley. So let's go ahead. That code kind of looks the same, so I'm just going to continue and blaze through that. And we'll refresh, and sure enough, everybody but Andy is dead now. So now it's Andy's turn to meet his maker. So we're going to do delete all, and of course that's just the simplest thing ever. And so our deletes are complete. So I'm going to reinsert everything again to refill those. And let's go through the updates. And as you might imagine, the updates will work a whole lot like deletes because they're pretty similar, aren't they? So this time I want to update whoever's last name is Wigley. I want to change that person's name to Andrew. That's really far-fetched, I know. And so sure enough, I do that. And I'll hit select. And now we have Andrew Wigley. Now we have update many. Anybody whose last name is not Randolph, I want to change their first name to Nicholas. So I'm not going to bore you with looping through that. Let's refresh. And so now we have Nick Randolph is still the same, but everyone else is Nicholas Tiffany, Nicholas Struess, and Nicholas Wigley. So, and then last but not least, I'm just using all my friends from the old Windows Mobile days that we used to work together. So Steve Hagendorfer. Call him if you want to know anything about Bluetooth Low Energy. He's like the main guy at Bluetooth SIG in Kirkland. In this case, I'm going to change everybody's last name to Hagendorfer. And we'll refresh that. And sure enough, it all works. So that's good. And then there's actually a way to close SQLite, to disconnect it, sometimes so you don't have any of those little handles hanging onto it, that kind of thing. So there you have it there. So I'm going to close that really quick. And then let's set a startup project to our big Windows. And let's fire it up. I'm not going to bore you by doing the exact same procedures again, but you can see that it's roughly the same, except I've got something new here around orders. So let's see. We'll hit select. It should be empty. So let me go ahead and I'm going to do that insert again, except I'm not stepping through anything, and I'll hit select. So here's all our friends again on big Windows. Now this time, I need to do something actually useful. I'm going to create an order. I'm selling things. I've got a point of sale machine. So I'm going to create an order here. So when I create the order, this first time it's going to fail. Do you know why? It's because I needed to select somebody and to select a product. So the first thing I'm doing is checking to see if you chose to pick any of these guys. And if you haven't, it's just going to keep on going. And you'll see that, hey, you need to select a customer and product before doing that. So let's do that. Let's do this the right way. So I'm going to say that Martin wants to buy a hard drive. So let's create an order based on that. So in this case, sure enough, through the clever use of tooltips, there's Martin with his ID, that beautiful GUID. And sure enough, there's a hard drive. And in this case, you already know how to do inserts. So you're saying I'm going to insert into the order table with customer ID, a product ID, and I'm just kind of hard-coded a quantity in this case. And so now we have orders. So let's hit select again, and you can see the orders. Now you probably know why I have a label above that orders list view called bad orders. If I'm a person working at a store trying to sell things, it's totally unintelligible to me what I'm trying to say there. It's like 3 GUIDs. What does that mean? That's why we do joins in databases, isn't it? We have to join things to tables to make things look nice, right? Because, you know, I need to know that Martin bought a hard drive, not that some random GUIDs are all together. But multi-table joins is something that's a little more difficult when you're doing stuff with LINQ. I'm not saying it's not doable, and that's why I took the time to figure out how to do it. But anyway, let's walk through doing a multi-table join. Because I'm a masochist. You love this stuff. So join. Here's how we're going to do it. And this is all, remember, this is all locally. We're just building our local app, and it's just working, and there's no network or anything. So first thing I do is I'm going to loop through. I'm looking at my order table. I'm saying give me every order I've got in there. And so I'm going to start iterating through that. Then, within there, I need to take a look at my customers, where the customer ID, you know, and the order and customer ID are equal to each other. You know, so that's kind of your typical join. Now, of course, normally when you use normal SQL, all this is going to happen all in one shot. I'm having to do it. It's a little less efficient. It's going to use a little bit more memory, but it's going to work. And so I'll do that. And then here, as you might imagine, I need to join in products where the product ID, you know, is equal to order product ID. And so once I put all those together, then I'm going to loop through here. And I created that view. Remember the view class I showed you earlier that I'm not going to sync? But I need a view to help be friendly to display it. So I created this data object view. And order ID, first name is equal to customer first name. Hey, look, tooltips. So we get a GUID, we get Martin, we get Struce here. We've got a product name, it's a hard drive. We have an order quantity, it's 1. So we can tell right away this is going to be a lot friendlier. I'm going to put all this together. I'm going to create a list because I may have multiple orders. I only got 1 this time. And I'm going to add this to the list, and then I'm just going to set that item source like you keep seeing me do over and over again equal to, hey, give me everything that's in that list you just created. So let's not belabor this, and let's kind of continue on here. And sure enough, we have our good order. Now, I'll admit, using a GUID for a primary key looks strange. I don't want to just say get used to it, but since I've spent so much time in this kind of disconnected sync world, uniqueness is hard to come by. And so people love to do identity columns and stuff like that. But you can imagine the scenario if you're doing identity columns on the server and people are grabbing data. You can imagine key collisions happening when people, 20 different people all create a new record locally, and maybe that new record all has the same primary key, and then you try to sync them up and they all crash into each other at the top when they get in the server. I went through this. I struggle with this all the time with merge replication because lots of companies did that. And you know the trade-offs. Obviously, when you're doing a join with a GUID, it's just not nearly as efficient and fast as if you were doing it against an integer or a big int. But there's pros and cons to each. When you're doing massive, if you built this system and it's supporting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users at a big company, or you built this for a consumer app, and you're doing that offline sync, uniqueness is going to trump the efficiency of an integer, at least in my estimation, based on my view of things. So anyway, that's kind of my key takeaway there. So we'll just leave that be. So now we've We're feeling good. We got a universal app. We're doing CRUD operations on SQLite. This was cool. It's pretty easy. I'm feeling like I'm ready for the enterprise. So now the last part is we need to talk about sync. We got to sync the data. How do we make this sync happen? And again, the cool thing about this is we want to remove lots of plumbing from the system. You could build a system and go build 400 REST services if you want to, and it might be a lot of fun. Or you can let Azure Mobile Services sync take care of a lot of that plumbing for you. Going back to IT managers, directors, CIOs, we are lowering risk to your project. You're speeding up your time to market because you didn't write all that. I'll tell you something about replication versus sync framework and our experiences we had with it. Great technology. Didn't have as much of adoption with sync framework as we did with replication. Do you know why? Because sync framework was a framework and the development teams had to write a bunch of code. And they introduced their own errors, and it lengthened the time to the mobile project. You know, the CIO is saying, hey, I just want these guys working on the mobile app. I don't want to worry building sync code. So kind of in the back of your mind, you think about stuff like that. So I know black boxes seem bad, but sometimes they're not too bad. So this isn't a total black box, but it helps you along. So real simple way this works. If you've ever used an old sync technology we had called Remote Data Access, or RDA, you will be familiar with this. It just uses some simple concepts. The first one is push. Whatever data I have locally in SQLite, I just want to push those changes up to the server. And it doesn't mean push on a table-by-table basis. It's going to take a look. It's going to use that change tracking, and it's going to push the deltas. It's going to just push what's new, what's changed up there. So it'll be more efficient going over wireless data networks. Then we're going to pull. This is rocket science, isn't it? Pull will be a little different. You're going to write pull code for every table that you want to download from SQL Azure or your own SQL server going back on-prem or Mongo or whatever, table storage. You're going to pull data, select star from customers, whatever, blah, 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 from each one. Now, the cool thing is, and this is also critical because nobody would adopt this technology if it was just a select star kind of thing, pull everything from this table. Because you might have systems that have 10 million records of customers or products or orders. You need to just bring down just what's needed for the device. So you need to filter that. So the great thing is on the pull async method, there's a parameter that you can put in a link query or an OData query to filter that down, where you can put in a where clause. And anything you can do in link, you can put it in there, so you can filter down that return value so it's something that's nice and small and appropriate for your mobile device rather than just bringing back everything. Here's another interesting thing with pull, and this is another sync concept in general. You always need to push up things before you pull down things, because things may have changed up on the server, and you need the server to know what's changed with you before maybe overwriting or changing things locally. So anyway, there's this sync queue. It's invisible. You don't have to worry about it. But when you try to call pull, the first thing that the SQLite's going to check with the wrapper we gave you is to see, hey, is there anything in here that really needs to be uploaded first? And if there is, it's going to forcibly upload those. Then it'll pull a download. Purge, I won't really go into that. It's kind of like deleting without tracking. We're in alpha stage. We're getting better and better documentation, but purge is going to be useful in situations where maybe I'm doing a bunch of deletes and I don't necessarily want to sync all these deletes back up. I might just want to say, hey, this stuff's gone, but I don't want you to track deletes going all over the place. And then conflicts. Again, optimic concurrency. Multiple people make changes to the same row. I'm going to show you that right now. And so we have this sync handler that's going to detect that conflict. I said earlier, this is based on the same good old web API that we all love. So just the same kind of adding scaffolding, when you're going to create controllers, except we have this special option now. You can see at the bottom, it's an Azure Mobile Service table controller instead of the other ones that you've been using in the past. And so you choose that. You'll get a nice dialog. You're going to choose one of those model classes. Remember the old classes that you created, customer, product, order. You're going to choose one of those from the combo box. It's just going to be like magic. And then it's going to just create, it's already created this data context class for you with Entity Framework, so you don't have to do anything there. It's on that second row of that dialog. And then it's going to just name it for you, just like the Web API does for everything. You need to do this for, you will not be able to sync these tables on SQLite with Azure, SQL Azure, until you've done that. So that's how you're going to wire each of these up. But what we're doing is we're giving you more instrumentation, more tooling, so that you don't have to do a lot of that hard work. And we're going to continue to do that so that you are doing less and less work and more of the stuff just gets genned for you. Here's a quick example. I know it's kind of an eye chart of an example controller. I'll show you a real one here in a second. I know we got about 10 minutes left. But it kind of looks exactly like anybody who's worked with Web API. Get all customers with an iQueryable. Just get one customer based on an ID. And this is all RESTful. Get, patch for updates, post for inserts, delete for deletes. So making sure, because I don't know about you guys, I'm a total Restafarian. The whole SOAP XML thing was a lot of fun if you had unlimited bandwidth, but if you're playing with mobile devices over wireless data networks, you need to be thoughtful of the user and how much time it takes when someone pushes a button on a device for that data to come back to them. If you know there's 5 ways to pull back the same data, you should choose the one that's most efficient. So wire protocols do matter. Pull, again, you see I'm doing this app.customer table pull async, and I pass this filter. So the filter here, again, is just basically a select star. Give me everything. But I could have put a where clause and all kinds of stuff in this filter to filter it down in case it was one of those 20 million row database tables back on the server side. Push is even simpler. I just say sync context push, and it just does it for me. And then purge looks a lot like a pull. And again, that's the delete thing. So let's finish this up. With the real heart of the system here. All right. So I'm doing everything locally. So as you can see here, let me drag, if I can. I'll stop that for a second and start it so I can see. So right here on the left-hand side, you see I've got these tables. I'm using the local emulator and everything on Azure and SQL. And actually, I don't care about the design surface. All you care about is I'm going to show you, here's what's in the server-side customer table, nothing. Here's what's in the order table on the server side. There's nothing in there. See, I'll refresh it. And there's nothing on products. So let's fire up the simulator. We got all that stuff we created. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push everything up to the server side. So I'm going to hit push. You saw some of the code in the slides there. I've got my little method I created to just test for connectivity, which is always a good thing to have on your phones and tablets, is do a quick check and see if the internet's there before you do something that might just fail. And I'm doing push async. And hopefully we'll get to the next line of code without having an error. And woo, we lucked out. All right. So now let's go prove that this stuff came up here. So here's that push. Here's the server-side table. I'm going to refresh it. All right, you see we pushed up those products. We pushed up the one order. And I'll refresh, and we pushed up all of our customers. So now let's start doing some tricks. Let's start playing around with it to make things change, So actually, let me go back to customers. And I'm just going to change my name to Fred, if I could spell. All right, so I changed on the server side to Fred. So now I'm going to hit pull on my client. And you can see I'm pulling async, and I'm just saying, give me all the customers. And I'm doing that with orders and products as well. And so now if I select here, you'll see I'm now Fred Tiffany. So this stuff really works, but let's do an update 1. So I changed the update 1 there to make Andy Wiggly into Andrew Wiggly. And so I'm going to push that. And let's see if it made that change. So let's refresh. So we see Andy Wiggly at the top. Now we see Andrew Wiggly. So now I'm going to come back here. I'm going to do update all. And if you remember, that's where everybody's last name gets changed to Heggendorfer. It just rolls off the tongue. I'm going to push all those Heggendorfers up to the server. All right. So let's look at our customers again. Now, here's where I'm going to try to do something weird. I'm going to take Andrew Heggendorfer and I'm going to change him to Jones. But instead of like pulling it and getting that changed and syncing this all up, I'm also going to make a change locally at the same time. Anything that will affect that record, because the versioning will catch it. So you know what? I'm just going to do another update all, which just does what we just did before. So nothing special. Everybody's Heggendorfer again. And so now I'm going to push this change. And look, something else happened. We just went flying into the sync handler. Because the sync handler, using the version tracking, said, hey, somebody made a change to that record up there, and they made a change down here, and I don't know who wins. We got to figure out who wins. So this is going to handle this for you. This is an interactive example. You can write code that will make the choices automatically, where it's not in the user's face. But in this case, you may have seen this anytime. Here, let me step through it, and it might look familiar to you. So here, I'm just throwing up a dialogue. And so, you can look on the screen here that you see we got a conflict between the two versions. It might be a little small for the screens here, but it basically says, hey, there's a conflict between the local and server versions. How do we resolve it? This is interactive resolution. Do you want to use the local one to win, or do you want the server to win? This is very common in an optimistic concurrency mobile sync situation. You can also write code to just make the choice for you. You could say server always wins. In merge replication, we allowed you to create all these conflict resolver things, and some people actually did it. How many times have you been in like Microsoft Word and maybe something happened and you had two versions of the Word and it says, which one do you want? It's just like that. It's just like that. So anyway, this solves that other problem around sync and optimistic concurrency. So in this case, I'm going to say use local version, and we'll finish running it. And so then we'll refresh, and Andrew Jones will turn to Andrew Heggendorfer, because we said the client wins in this case. But if we'd done the other way, it would have gone the other way. And I'll close SQLite. And guess what? We are all done. Go check out Andy's session after mine. He's going to go super deep on universal apps. I kind of just inherently do everything with universal apps now. He's going to go talk about some more nuts and bolts about it. But I think it's a great way to do it. It's a great way, it's all about code reuse, right? Getting things to work everywhere. Here's some other good ones. Andy's going to do a session tomorrow also on network survival. Lots of networking, fun stuff. If you're into this cross-platform stuff, if you've heard of PhoneGap or Cordova, if you're into HTML, and CSS, doing that to build your cross-platform apps, or if you're looking at Xamarin, we've got some other good sessions coming up. So I really appreciate you coming out. We got lots of great resources. You've probably seen this slide a million times already. Please fill out your session evaluation. I appreciate you coming, and definitely come find me at the hub or whenever, and let's hang out, and I'd be happy to talk to you about your projects. Thank you so much.